Hello and welcome back. This is Luke, Stickmasterluke. So where we left off last time is we completed the main game loop. So that's pretty much the entire game that we've just created. It's functional, it works. You play, you join, you can play, and you can leave. That sounds kind of rude, but what I'm trying to say is that so we set up a point system, so you earn points in the game. Those points only last for that session, that play session. So when you earn those points in game, you leave, and then you come back like the next day, you don't have those points again. So what we're going to be doing for the last few lessons here is we're going to be going over the features that actually make this a good top quality game. So we're going to go over saving data for players, and then we're also going to go over how to sell some stuff in your game and how to make upgrades in your game so that there's something to move for players to move towards. So to be more precise about what we're actually doing, one, we're making the whole data structure for the game, and then on the other side, we're also going to be making, we're going to be switching points over to wins. So instead of having points on the leaderboard up here in the upper right, we're going to have wins. It's going to say wins, so you can see every player's how many times they've won. Because points are going to be used as a currency in our game, and these points are going to be able to buy you an emerald sword, which is like the normal sword, but when you're the Bloxxer, but when you use it, it does twice the damage, and it looks super awesome. And then also, for 25 points, you're able to upgrade your, you're able to up your chance of becoming the Bloxxer next round. So let's say you've played 5 rounds in the game, and you've earned some points, you've earned 25, and you really just want to be the Bloxxer, you can spend those 25 points to raise your chance of becoming the Bloxxer next round. And then also, to make this more like game-like, maybe you want to make some money off your games, you can sink some Robux, where I'm going to show you how to do that with developer products. And in our game, we're going to make one developer product. You're going to be able to buy 100 points for 100 Robux. So really simple, but also it really completes this as a full front page style game. So to get started, we're going to work on the data persistence, the data storage. So to do that, in the main game script, we're going to want to access the data store. Roblox has a data store system already built up for you, and we're going to be using that. So local data store equals sorry, not typing too good today. Oh, data store service. Let me use the function get store, or get data store, sorry. And so you can think of each data store in your game as a book of information. And so we're just going to title this book player data. Because the only information for our game that we're going to be using right now is players' information. So every player's can have their own dictionary of things about them. These things are going to be how many wins they have, how many points they have, their current chance at becoming the Bloxxer, and if they own a emerald sword. Okay, so this is the data store, and we're going to be using it really smart. I'm going to teach you guys some smart ways to use the data store so that we're only getting the information when we start the game, and we're only saving the information when the player leaves the game. Right, because most games, they'll use a data store in which every time you get a point, they'll save, and that can actually be, that can slow down your game, and possibly, if you're doing it too often, some saves won't go through. So we're going to be doing it this nice and safe way. And to do that, we're going to create a variable right here. Player data. So this right here is our kind of like local version of the data store. So what happens is when a player joins a game, we're going to use a data store to get their current information, and we're going to put it into the player data. And then when they leave, we're going to take their current information from player data and save it to the data store. So this player data variable is just going to be like our temporary storage for the information of the players. So let's scroll down to on player added. In here, we're gonna get the player's current data, and we're gonna put that data into the player data. So we're just gonna use the variable my data because this is the on player entered. So this person's data, for lack of proper variable names, I'm just my data. Okay, so we're going to be using, to figure out which player we're saving to, we're going to be using their user ID as an index into this kind of dictionary of information. So this is like the page number that you look on, we're going to be using the player's user ID. We could use the player's name, but players have the ability to change their names on Roblox. Users have the ability to change their name on Roblox, so we're going to be using user ID because that never changes. Alright, and then oh yeah, so let me finish this real quick. So what we're doing here with this OR is we're getting their current information, and if they don't have any information, then we're creating a new table set for their information, right? And then now I'm going to go through and define each of the pieces of information that we're going to be using with this player. So that's what OR does. If the thing in front of it is nil, then it's going to use the thing behind it. We're using that same kind of method over here, is that their points value is equal to the current points value, and if that current points value doesn't exist, then it's going to be starting off at 0. So we're setting like 0 as a default. We're going to do the same thing for wins. Oops. Wins. Let's see, what would this be? Multiplier. Your multiplier is your chance of becoming the Bloxxer. And Emerald Sword. Okay, so multiplier needs to be set to or 1, because by default you're gonna have a 1% chance, not 1%, but 1 times chance of becoming the Bloxxer. And then Emerald Sword, we could use a true or false, but it kind of messes with this. It messes with OR logic, and also we're gonna keep everything a number, keeps everything simple, and I've already planned it out for numbers. But you could use any kind of data. You could store string values, you could store numbers, you could store booleans. There's a bunch of different kinds of data you could save. We're just gonna be using numbers here. Keep everything the same. Okay, and now after we've gotten their current data, we're going to save this data into the player data, into the local storage, the temporary storage. Oops. Right. So when they enter the game, their data is put in here, and so we can access that. And this is like our temporary storage of this player's information. So all we do is player data, and we can get all their player data like by doing this. Okay. Now let's make it save when they leave. So this get async gets the current information, and now we're gonna have to save the information. So to do this, we're going to, before the main game loop, this is the loop, because this loop is like always running. It's never going to get past this, so make sure you don't write any code down here, because this loop will be taking up the entire thread, the entire cycle. So it's got to be above the while true loop. game.players.player removing. So this is when a player starts to leave your game. This is when we're going to want to save. Player removing is a function of players, or an event, sorry, and it returns a player that's leaving. Make sure the player exists. And then this part's actually pretty simple. Actually, we're going to make a function that permanently saves, so we could just call this Cool. So you can see here we're able to reconstruct this player's current information by looking in our temporary holder for their information. If it exists, which it always should, but it's also good to check. Then we're going to save it to the data store, which is across is saved, so when they leave and they come back, we can access this again. So the first value is the index that we're going to be saving to, and that index is just like in the player data. The index is going to be the player's user ID, and then we're going to be saving the information, which is my data. Cool. So now if we ever want to permanently save for a player, all we do is we call this function like that. Cool. So when a player goes to leave, we call that, but also we want to clean up their information from that table, so from our temporary table, because we don't want it holding the information of every player forever, because we don't need it. This is the temporary holder, and so when the player leaves, we don't need to hold their information anymore, because we're not going to save it anymore after they leave. Sorry. Player data. So we simply set that part of the information to nil. And then if you ever want to make like a manual save system, you could do this. So like if you want someone to only be able to save like it were a classic arcade style game where you save it specific checkpoints, stuff like that, you could just like call this function. Okay, and then also we want to save if the server or the game is closing. So we want to save like everyone's information, any information that's still left in the game. We're going to want to save it. So there's a function of game called onClose, and you can actually set it. And what happens is you can only set this once. If you try setting it twice, it does some funky stuff. But you set this, and it will run this function when the game is closing, when the server is shutting down. So we're creating a function, and we're setting it to this function that we're creating right here. So we're going to iterate through every index that's left in player data, and we're just going to save it. So the index should still be the player's user ID, because we're iterating through every information. This is supposed to be saved exactly how the data store is saved. And then also the value is the same exact thing. because they're very similar structures, and so it's very easy to go ahead and save this information to the data store. So when your game closes, it will save everyone any data that's left in the system. So if players are currently playing, it will save for them. And then also up here, if a player leaves, it'll save right then and there. And that's how you save it. I'm Stickmasterluke, signing off, and remember, you make the game.